I was born in New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey, but I was raised here. Born in New Jersey by accident, and then went to the Bronx. So I spent 8 years in the Bronx, and then we moved down here permanently. But my people are from here, my mama, my daddy, his people. Every summer, every Christmas, you know, every holiday here before we moved. So this is home. This is home. My mother is Susan Davis Grant Armstrong, and my father was Reverend Joseph H. Grant.
Siblings?
I had one brother, passed away, 18 years ago. His name was Trevor Howell Grant. This very tidy lady, older lady, that put me in the mind of a grandmother. I didn't go to school at Miss Ruby's school, but I had a grandmother who had lots and lots of friends, and I remember her making a point to go to Miss Ruby's, to Baskerville, to just sit and spend some time with Miss Ruby, talking about whatever it was that tidy grandmotherly women talked about when they got together. So we would oftentimes accompany her on those rides to Baskerville and get a chance to kind of half the way be a part of their conversation. You know, it was never allowed, but for so long, for you to be way up in people's business. You couldn't get way up in their business, but you were able to kind of hang around the fringes of their conversation. So those are my first memories of Miss Ruby. Well, you know, they would talk a lot about personal things. Hey, girl, how you doing? What's going on? My grandmother was very much a caregiver involved with a lot of children's activities through the church. My grandmother, Mary Davis, was an adopter of children, and so she always had kids, and it was hard for people to determine whether they were her own grandkids or somebody else's grandkids. But her house was just a place where people felt like they could leave their children, and also a place where children felt like it was okay for them to be left. And so I think that she kind of connected with Miss Ruby in terms of the kids and the impact that they both had on children's lives. We were encouraged to think of her as a very, very important person, and a person that was worthy of respect. She was held up by my grandmother and other people in the community as someone to look toward when you're thinking about ultimate, and extreme sacrifices. I think that a lot of times when we hear people talk about Miss Ruby and her role as an educator, they really don't understand. They're putting it in the terms of the way we would think about it today, that teachers are hardworking. They often have to sacrifice a whole lot for their classrooms and their children, the love and dedication for their kids and all of that. But back in the 30s, to be really a pioneer and really to be the person who introduced serious early childhood development to people who were in a constant state of struggle. That's just the best way to describe it. Many people were in a constant state of struggle. It's hard for us to realize the amount of time, effort, energy, personal resources that had to come to bear in order to make that happen. In order for us to talk about how teachers struggle now, there had to be somebody like Miss Ruby who really, who really and truly struggled to make that even possible. And so she was always in our minds. We were taught and expected to think of her as a great woman because of that, the extreme sacrifices that she made on behalf, of other people. And like I said, someone my daughter's age, it's just hard to even describe to them the amount of sacrifice that had to happen back in the 30s for something as basic a right as we think it now, as early childhood development and education. It just, that has just evolved over the last couple of years, that it really is a basic right for every person in this nation. And it really is hard to believe that when in her lifetime, and then I knew her in her lifetime, that and I'm just years old, you know what I'm saying? 49 years old, that it's just that close in history. So I remember being in Harlem and hearing her name being called on NPR. I was like 19, 20 years old, and really having it hit me then that, dang, Miss Ruby really was the bomb. You know what I'm saying? People really did know who she was. She really did make an impact that other people outside of little old Georgetown County in South Carolina really and truly know who this woman is. So not direct impact, but I always remember her as being a very pleasant woman. Not so much a sugar sweet honey. You understand what I'm saying? Not that kind, but just very kind expression, very calm and soothing expression. Made you feel very comfortable, but not so comfortable that you could act a fool, but you know what I'm saying? Very, comfortable and safe. She had a safety to her. I don't really have that many memories of the school, except to be in the space, sitting in the chairs, and kind of pretending maybe that we were, me, my brother, my cousin, Kim would come down from New York in the at certain times of the year, just to be in the space and just kind of imagine that we were students there and kind of mimic what we think would have happened in the school, being in the space and just playing, touching things. But mostly I remember being on the grounds of Baskerville. My grandmother had this wonderful knack of going to different places in Georgetown County to visit friends and family, but never going into the house or going into the, wherever they were. Oftentimes they would just have an hour's conversation with Ms. Ruby leaning against the car and my grandmother sitting in the car, and they would just sit there and find something to talk about for 30, 45 minutes, to an hour, just talking about stuff. And like I said, we were never able to get deep into the conversation, but it always seemed to end with just encouragement. Keep on going, girl. You know what I'm saying? Don't let them people get on your nerves, girl. You go ahead on and do what you got to do. God is able. Those types of conversations, to just encourage each other to keep going on, because the missions were really bigger, greater than any of us really realized. For us, it wasn't really an option, and so the word in our house is, you're going to get up out of here and do something. My mother was very unconventional in terms of employment. She was one of the first women to cut hair in this area. She was the first woman at Georgetown Steel. So she worked a lot in those types of industries. The importance for us was not necessarily to be degreed, or on the other side of my family we have lots of PhDs, and my dad was a PhD. lots of degreed people. But it wasn't necessarily the most important thing. The important thing in our community and in our household was to be productive, to learn and know how to do something that's going to benefit yourself, take care of your basic needs, you see what I'm saying? And some way for you to figure out how to give back to the community. And also that it's an ongoing thing. My grandmother, Mary Davis, got her, high school diploma way after her children had received their high school diplomas, and she went to nursing school, so it wasn't just that once you turn 21 or whatever, you finish college, you're done. We were always encouraged to continue to learn, to be trained, to absorb something, throughout your, take a class, she would take classes on floral design, she would take classes on ceramics, she would take classes on arts and crafts. Always busy your mind with learning how to do something else. So that's how education was kind of defined for us. Now, there was often talk about respectable professions like nursing and teaching and things like that. And so I think that older people in the community were pointing out the things that they felt were successful, and had created progress for their group in their generation. A school was a hard thing. It was not an easy thing for me, especially elementary school and middle school. I struggled greatly in math, still do. I think I have, if there's a disease or some kind of sickness around that, I probably have it, whatever it is, mathitis or whatever. I just have that fear of numbers and always struggled with it all my life, so it was not an easy thing. Now, high school, I think that what I did was I recognized my strengths and I worked really hard at that, and then just tried the best I could with what I really had a problem with. So I kind of learned how to work the system in high school, but and also to the move from New York, which was a totally different place in terms of education. Now, certainly having their issues at PS 166, but it was a culture, it really was a culture shock, even for an African-American young girl at 8 years old, being in a school where, I heard Spanish on a daily basis. My best friend, Gabrielle, was Jewish. To come to a place where everything was so damned boxed and segregated, and so I often stepped over the line in the third grade, speaking to people that I probably shouldn't have been speaking to, just making the assumption that friendships were possible and those types of things. So that kind of made it a smaller experience until you figure it out that this is the way you survive in this particular environment. So I think that kind of compounded some of the issues that we had, or that I had. Now, because there was no failing, there was not you didn't have an option of it, that there was just no choice that you were going to stay back or fail, or it just wasn't an option. And so even as a very young person, you were always trying to figure out how to make it through whatever struggle you were going through, because there wasn't no choice. There wasn't anything else for you to do. But I was not. I had a lot of anxiety in the beginning around school. And all that had to be worked out. But it was we always realized it as a necessity. There wasn't. You didn't have any other choice but to do that.
What was your old name of the elementary school?
PS 166 in Manhattan is where I started school. Bynum Elementary School in Georgetown is where I went to school. Kingsington after Bynum, and then J.B. Beck Middle School. I remember, I don't have a lot of memory of teachers in elementary school. I remember a teacher by the name of Miss Grantham, I think that was her name, being very strict. And one of the things that I remember clearly, there was a young lady in our class that she was drawing, she was very quiet, African American young lady, and she was drawing a nude of some, but when I tell you, it was like a classical piece of work. So it looked as though, now looking back at it now, it looked like she looked into an art book, and she didn't have anything in front of her, but she was just sketching this woman, kind of that, you know, that pose with the woman backwards on the chair kind of thing. It was phenomenal. And I remember her being chastised so badly for doing that because that teacher couldn't see that it was something that was valued. The only thing that she could see was that it was naked and it was inappropriate for school. And it was not the time for that. I mean, we were doing something else, but there was no, and I could see her just shut down. And I think about her now and wonder if she ever realized how magnificent an artist she was, even in the third grade. It was phenomenal. In my eyes, it was phenomenal, you know. So I have lots of memories of that. I have memories of, you know, in high school, of having problems with what was appropriateness in terms of what could be said and what could be done. And I was always, you know, kind of challenging those things in as much as I could without getting my behind whipped when I, you know, got home. So, I mean, I would be the one. Madonna was big when I was in, you know, in high school. So I had fishnet stockings and roach clips hanging out of my hair. I didn't even know what roach clips were for. I was trying to figure out how you know, kill the roaches with how you think about. I had no idea what roach clips were, but they had the feathers hanging all off of them, and I'd have them all shagged in my hair and all that kind of stuff. And so I remember always not having issues, but creating issues about appropriateness. I remember teachers that told the truth about things and almost feeling like they had to do it in secrecy or not as a part of a classroom experience. I remember a teacher very early on placing a picture of Strom Thurmond at the South Carolina State, surrounded by dark sorority girls, and us being asked, who is that? And we like, Strom Thurmond. And who is Strom Thurmond? And we, oh, he's a racist, he's this, he's that, he's the other. And that teacher asking, well, why is he surrounded by black sorority girls at State University? And for us thinking, well, we don't know, because that doesn't make sense. It doesn't go with the narrative that we've been taught for a long time. And I remember her slipping us that open secret that he was the father of one of those sorority girls. And it wasn't so much to gossip about his infidelities or his state of confusion, you know what I'm saying, or his politics. But she pointed to his face and she said, no matter what you think of him, it's way more complex than you think. And no matter what you think of him, he is your state representative. You go to him and you go to his office and you ask for and demand what it is that you feel you need and what your community needs, no matter what. So I don't care what anybody tells you, who they tell you he is. He represents the state of South Carolina. which means he represents you. And you find a way, always, to have your state representatives acknowledge you, know who you are, and represent you. And that made a huge impact on me. And this was a middle school experience. And so, you know, and all of this, like I'm looking at it, you know, it certainly wasn't anything that she could have said in an open situation. But it was, I mean, it was the truest, you know what I'm saying? It was like the truest thing for the year. And so we really learned, you know, to maneuver that. So if you're dealing with certain types of education, call Strom Thurmond. If it has anything to do with your husband's military service or whatever, he gonna handle it. He gonna get it done. So you learn how to write that letter. You learn to call attention to yourself. You learn to make sure that he knows that in this way, without, you know, compromising his little raggedy beliefs or whatever he got going on, you have to find a way as a constituent of this state to make sure that he handles his responsibility. And so I remember things like that happening in a school setting, and wishing now that that truth could have been, you know, have been bottled, exactly, and told, you know, so that people can know and understand. I remember having a when I think ninth grade was when Ronald Reagan was shot, and I remember we didn't know nothing about politics, honey. We don't know who, you know, these people are. You just hear, you mimicking what people in the church say, what people in your family said. And so we said some things that were not so nice about him because he was a Republican president, and people were saying that he did not represent everybody fairly in the country because of his political affiliation and all that kind of stuff. And I remember a teacher being so angry with us and wanting to have us suspended for that. And all of us, you know, freedom of speech, we can say what we want to say and blah, blah, this and the other. But when I went home and we were talking about it, my grandfather, who was not, he wasn't a big reader, he wasn't extremely literate, you see what I'm saying? My grandmother, Mary Davis's husband, Joe Davis, but him being very upset that you would verbalize that to other people. And he wasn't a hitter or a yeller or anything like that. He didn't do any of that. But for him to be very stern and say, number one, you taking stuff we saying in this house and putting it out there in the public, that ain't none of your business to do. And I later understood that to mean that, you know, speaking about politics in public is not a safe thing, or has not traditionally been a safe thing for African Americans in this community to do. So now you could be all 1980s all you want to, but, you know, think about things before you say it, because this is, you know, you're still a Geechee girl, you're still a country girl, and those types of things in the past have had adverse effects on people, number one. But number two, he is the one that sits in the chair. He sits in the chair as the President of the United States of America. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you will soon enough have your opportunity to voice, you know, and weigh in on that. But right now, you keep that to yourself. You see what I'm saying? It ain't productive. You see what I'm saying? And you don't even really know what you're talking about. So hold that, you know, to yourself. And so, you know, I remember school kind of, you know, bringing things like that about. I remember, you know, Marvin Gaye dying in school, and I just, you know, protested for a national holiday. I just felt like we shouldn't have to go to school on the day that Marvin Gaye died, you know. I remember going to school in this really glittery outfit to, you know, just honor Marvin Gaye, because it was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? He is like so gone, and that not being, you know, so appreciated. But I learned, you know, way more than just the math and English, and you know what I mean? A lot about appropriateness, and how people define that, and then spent the rest of the time trying to figure out how to get around all that. Um, thank you just seems so, jacked up and small, but that I think that we got it. We understand. You know what I'm saying? That we really, and I got it now. It might have taken me 50 years to get it and understand, but, just a little bit of more experience, maturity, being a mother and raising and trying to handle one child, I got it. I understand, a little more of the type of stick-to-itness and commitment and a compassion and love that you had to have, not only for the children, but for their cause. You know what I'm saying? Because, you can love kids and never get in the fray and fight for them tooth and nail every day, and I would also tell her that I know and understand through you that all revolutionaries don't look alike. All revolutionaries don't look alike. They don't all wear black and pump the fist and all of that, but you were a revolutionary nonetheless, and more lethal because you came up nice and calm, you know what I'm saying, and unsuspecting, but behind you, was an educated force. Because of you, behind you were people that had a respect for education and knew that education's role and place in their lives. And that is, that's golden.